Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with a very special guest. Not a first-time guest, but one of the best YouTubers out there for my money. It's none other than KairosTime. Kairos, welcome back to the channel, man.
Hey man, it is great to be here. Thank you so much for having me again.
It's great to have you. You always have very articulate and provoking thoughts about the game. And today I noticed that you made a Reddit post and a video on why offense is ruining the game. Maybe I'm overstating it a bit, but you have a problem with offense right now in regards to the balance of Clash Royale and kind of how things are feeling as a result of that. So let me start off by asking you in 30 seconds, tell me why having more defense would make Clash Royale better.
That's a really great question. I'm awful at taking 30 seconds, and I've already taken like 10 of them.
I know. Come on, man.
I think that right now my biggest problem is that that defensive cards and gameplay just is not celebrated right now, and there's so fewer options than we've had in the past. And I'm going to leave it there because that's my 30 seconds.
That's it. You're up. Ding, ding, ding. Good job. All right. So, I mean, that is basically your thesis to this whole, the conversation, and it's a good place to start. So, you do mention something in your video to that end, I guess, is you mentioned that you want the game to be more based on skill rather than based on knowing the meta and how to counter it. Can you explain the difference of the two?
Absolutely. So I am one that really just takes a really deep dive into the meta. I pride myself in my tier list videos for all of the different metas in Clash Royale, and I take a lot of hard looks into the usage rates and the win rates of all the different cards. And because of that, I've learned to kind of manipulate the meta and look at all those different cards. And when I'm playing decks competitively in like grand challenges and things like that, I'm not actually playing super skilled. Okay, I mean, I'm an above average player, but I am nowhere near the skill level of a lot of these pros. But where I pride where I pride myself is my ability to really take advantage of that meta and play around that. And while that's something that I really enjoy, I think that you should be able to build a deck and play the deck the way that you want to play a deck that have a lot of different options and play to that skill level, be able to do well based off of your skill rather than based off of the fact that you're playing a deck that is just part of the meta or counters the meta. Can you see what I'm saying there?
I do see what you're saying, but playing devil's advocate, wouldn't you say there's a lot of skill to being able to counter the meta?
Absolutely. There absolutely is. I mean, very few people take a look at the meta as in-depth as I do. And I absolutely get that. A lot of skill in that, but I still think that we've been seeing minor poison and hog P.E.K.K.A. so much recently that you basically have to just counter that, and that forces you to leave out a lot of really fun gameplay. So like I would love to be able to be able to use some like mortar some more, or for the average player to be able to play some mortar. We still see a lot of mortar and expo users in competitive tournaments and things like that, but I like the average person to be able to do that rather than having to play around specific types of cards.
See, I totally get your point, and I'm on board with you until you mentioned that one card, mortar. Because I feel like maybe it's just my trophy range and the fact that it's a common, but I feel like mortar is everywhere right now. Are you speaking specifically more to tournament level standard here?
Yeah, I am speaking more to tournament level standard. We definitely see the mortar, especially above 5,000 trophies. We see the mortar playing a lot there because it's a common, it's easy to level up, and it's competitive. There are a couple of really good competitive decks in the ladder for mortar. But even then, there are a lot of different win conditions like like a graveyard right now. Graveyard just isn't very strong in the meta right now, and it does nothing. Like it would be a good counter to like P.E.K.K.A. Hog Rider decks, because P.E.K.K.A. does so little against the graveyard. But you can't play the graveyard right now, and that's okay. I just want more options out there.
Okay, you want a more diverse meta, but to me, and I've been saying this for a little while now, I think the meta feels pretty diverse right now. Tell me why I'm wrong.
You're definitely not wrong. There's the meta is extremely diverse right now in comparison to sometimes that it has been in the past. But there are some, you definitely have to count on specific cards being in there. So like Electro Wizard, that's a staple in any competitive deck. I mean, you have to have the Electro Wizard in there. The Mega Knight, the P.E.K.K.A. You have to plan on these specific cards being in there, and to me it's a lot more fun when you see a lot of different unique and diverse. I love getting crushed by somebody who's playing a deck that I've never seen before. And I love it. It's so fun because I'm like, what in the world? How does this happen?
And then you feel like something's really wrong with you, right? You're like, what? How did I lose to that?
Exactly. When I see a new combination that really takes me off guard, even if I lose to it, I consider that to be a lot of fun. And I was playing a Grand Challenge a couple days ago, and I saw somebody using a giant skeleton deck, and he beat me, and I was like, you know what, props to you, that's really awesome. Granted, I was kind of messing around with a different weird deck, but it was a lot of fun. It was fun for me to do that, and it wasn't frustrating at all.
No, I can see that. I mean, so getting back to the main point, though, you say that you want more deep. You think the solution is just a little bit of a more shifting that equilibrium. Help me out, Kairos. Equilibrium back to defense. So, what would you say to people who make the counter argument that, Kairos, that sounds great and it makes sense, but people like offense? I mean, that was the Clash Royale's team's philosophy in making this game, is they wanted offense to kind of always be a step ahead of defense. If you look at competitive sports, oftentimes people prefer, whether it be hockey or football or soccer or whatever, they prefer a high-scoring affair. What would you say to that argument?
I think that argument is absolutely fair. People do like offense over defense, and I absolutely agree that offense should be a little bit ahead of the game as far as defense goes. But right now what we see is we have these cards that are so versatile on both defense and offense that they virtually eliminate the viability of strictly defensive cards. So let's talk about like the Electro Wizard or the P.E.K.K.A. or the Mega Knight. These cards are extremely solid on defense. They can stop so many pushes super easily, and then they offer so much threat value on offense that you have this constant pushing back and forth, and there's almost no time to just take a step back and be like, okay, let me actually come up with a strategy here, rather than thinking about what my opponent is going to be playing, or rather than reacting to your opponent's push. And basically these cards have eliminated the need for defensive cards like the Tombstone, which is just too slow of a slow pace. It just slows the pace down, and so you can't go back on the offense with a Tombstone, or Guards, or Valkyrie. A lot of these cards that are just never used because there are other cards that just on the offense, and then you have this strong counter push, and there's just no need to use those cards.
Yeah, you know what? You sold me there, I think. I wasn't really fully bought in until that answer, because you're right. I mean, think about it. This game has really boiled down in a lot of ways to you don't want to be the first person to send in your Hog Rider, because then they're probably going to drop an E-Wiz or a Mega Knight. They don't have to worry about that, and you're at an elixir disadvantage because you sent in the Hog Rider first, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of your issue in a nutshell.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So we talked about this quite a bit, about the problem. Now let's get to your solution. You suggest a buff to siege, a buff to defense. Do you still stand by that? Or it has been a few days since you put out your video and your post. Have you kind of shifted your opinion at all?
I have shifted my opinion a little bit. Some people have brought up some really great counter arguments on Reddit, and that's one of the reasons why I love those Reddit posts. That's fantastic. If I have something like that, I like putting it on there because I know I'll get constructive feedback. I don't think that buffing defenses is really the main solution, and I do think that Siege needs a little bit of a buff, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. But what I really think it comes down to is toning down those cards that are extremely good on defense and offense to fit into more of like one of the roles. So maybe the Mega Knight and the P.E.K.K.A. are, we nerf their health, so they're really good on defense, but then they don't offer as much offensive threat value or something along those lines. And then there are other cards as well that I didn't mention. I think those are the three key points, but then we also have like Inferno Dragon and Goblin Gang that also fit into that. And you just have like all of those different cards, and there are so many that it's just too aggressive right now.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you too, and I think a lot of it might have to do, just in my opinion, with the speed of the card too. Like barbarians have good utility on offense and defense, but they're so slow, and same thing with P.E.K.K.A to an extent, that you at least have time to recoup some elixir and deal with them. You know, whether it be
Absolutely.
kiting or using a spell to get a value trade. But when you talk about specifically like the Mega Knight and the E-Wiz, it needs an immediate answer, right? So
Yes.
do you think that maybe movement speed could be an answer too?
Absolutely. Actually, that's something I mentioned in my post was that these troops that offer primarily defensive value are usually slow moving, close range troops like the Valkyrie and even the barbarians. You know, you can deal with barbarians. The P.E.K.K.A is a little bit different because that P.E.K.K.A does allow some. It's a tanky enough troop that you can actually build up a push around it. So you defend, then you have time to build up a push before your P.E.K.K.A goes across the river, and that's really where the P.E.K.K.A is just a little too strong in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that with the P.E.K.K.A, just personally, I think that she might be the maybe she's just a result of the meta, right? Because maybe she's not as quite as strong because she hasn't really gotten a buff, has she? I mean, am I wrong?
She got a buff way back in, I've got the date right here, February of 2017. So it was a long time
Okay.
ago. She
Yeah,
got
so
yeah.
I think her rise to power might be symptomatic of the overall issues that you kind of outline in your post.
I would
The
agree with that.
bandit, the battle ram, before this, like beatdown being golems being everywhere, but of course the Mega Knight as well, Hog Rider. Now, like she's clearly the best option to shut those down because of swing power. So I'm not sure. Maybe in my mind, maybe she's not the problem, but every other card you mention is. But I guess we're kind of
Yeah,
nitpicking there.
it's tough. I think she was forced into the meta because of the aggressive bridge spam meta, and I think now she just has such a strong chokehold on the meta that I don't think that we're going to see a big change unless she does get some type of a little bit of a nerf. But she definitely is a result of the meta going on there, and now she's just people have learned how great she is, and I don't know. But like you said, I think we're kind of nitpicking there.
Yeah. Okay. So you identify two archetypes that you think that we need to actually buff or make better in order to make the game a little bit more healthy again. And you kind of pinpoint beatdown and siege. So what is it about these two archetypes that, or what would you do to make these two archetypes better again?
First of all, let's go ahead and talk about beatdown. Beatdown is the reason why beatdown is really struggling is because of this fast-paced tempo of the battle that's going on right now. Beatdown needs some time to build up a push, right? And if you're constantly sending back and forth troops back and forth, the beatdown player has no time to build up a push. I've played matches where I'm playing an Electro Wizard and a P.E.K.K.A and a Hog Rider all in my deck, and I was never able to pull my opponent was never able to put down a Golem or never able to put down a Giant just because the tempo was so quick. I think that beatdown will get an indirect buff as we take a look at those different cards. And I think that will bring them back into the meta and make them offensive because beatdown cards, they're actually still pretty strong and viable in the ladder right now, where the meta hasn't this offensive meta hasn't shifted over quite yet. I think it takes some time for cards to level up their cards and stuff for it to be a problem. So I don't think that beatdown is going to need a direct buff, but that indirect buff is absolutely going to help. Siege, however, I do think that Siege does need some type of a slight buff. I do not want it to become the awful defensive gameplay that happened when the game was first released. I mean, that was awful. And I will be the first person to say that. But right now, the usage rates for Mortar and Expo in the ladder and tournaments are incredibly low. I talk about this in my tier list videos. I think right now they're both under 2% use, and they're definitely below 50% win rate in all metas that I'm taking a look at. And as such, I think that they do need a little bit of an increase in their ability to either last a little bit longer or be able to deal some more damage to the enemy tower, or something. I'm going to leave that to Supercell because they're the kings of balancing, I think. I'm not going to pretend to be able to make that decision.
Sure.
But I do think that that's something that will allow more players to be able to play them rather than just these extremely high skilled players.
Indeed, and also a buff to Siege would theoretically give a little bit of buff to Beatdown as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nice. Okay, so we've talked about the solution. We haven't really talked too much about the defenses. So what would you do to the defenses to make them stronger, or would you not touch them at all and just make those changes we talked about to the big problem cards? The P.E.K.K.A, the Mega Knight, the E-Wiz, maybe Night Witch.
Yeah, I think that there are certain ones that will become viable again once we take care of those other problems. So like the Tombstone or the Inferno Tower, I think both of those will still become good defenses, and you'll be able to use them when they're not overshadowed by the Electro Wizard. But I do think that the Tesla needs some type of a buff. The usage rate and the win rate is incredibly low in grand challenges. I mean, extremely low. Or Tesla, oh man, or even the ladder where you can over level it. Like I've tried over leveling a Tesla, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't know what it is too, because like when I go up against a Tesla in, the 1 out of every 1,000 battles I do, first off, I'm always like, ha, this guy's playing Tesla. It must be a joke. It's going to be an easy win. But, for what it's worth, like half the time I get annoyed by it,
Yeah, and I think that the biggest issue with the Tesla, I think its damage output is just fine. I think that it just needs to last a little bit longer. I think the reason why you want a Tesla is be able to put it down and prepare for it to push. But its lifespan is just a little too short for that to actually be an option. You basically have to put it down as soon as their troops are getting across the bridge, and at that point you might as well be playing a cannon or even an Inferno Tower. Like the Tesla is
going to stop one push just like a cannon would for 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, so last question for you, and this is probably the most important question, is, okay, let's say that everybody in my audience, you've convinced us all, Kairos, you did it again, that this is an issue in the game. So the big question is, once we let's theoretically say the Clash Royale team they say, oh my god, Kairos is onto something here. We're going to go ahead and make all the changes that he suggests. How do we prevent this from happening in the future, especially about power creep when they introduce these really powerful new cards?
Yeah, this is a hot topic. Power creep absolutely is. Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend to be a pro at balancing video games. There's like a lot of different theories on how to do that, but I think that one of the best things that they can do is release a card kind of like they did with the Flying Machine, where they put the card out. It's kind of underwhelming at first. And honestly, it still kind of is underwhelming. You just recently did a video with the Flying Machine on there, and it was fantastic. But I think that putting it out there and saying, okay, here you go, play around with it, and then seeing if the players are able to find a good niche for that card. And if they don't, then maybe get a little bit of a buff. That way, it's not stepping on any other card's toes. There's still other great options to use, but it's also not going to creep over those other cards and become, totally replace the Musketeer or totally replace the Dark Goblin. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think their philosophy right now is when they release cards, they like them to be powerful, or at least viable, like right away. So you think that you would kind of err more on the side of being a little bit more cautious with the power of the new cards, more like Cannon Cart.
yeah, exactly. Because when a new card comes out into the game, you're either going to see complaints or we want this card to be stronger. And we saw complaints with the Night Witch, of course.
Yes.
And I think that just caused for like a caustic atmosphere in the game, whereas Cannon Cart, people are just like, oh dude, let's buff this, like let's make this viable again, and it's that feels better to me, at least.
I agree with you. I think that and plus you don't get the people who are all upset saying, hey, they make an overpowered card and then they nerf it after we spend money or whatever to upgrade it, right? So
absolutely,
everybody's kind of happier that way. So I agree with you there, Kairos. But dude, it was a pleasure having you on as always. I will link your Reddit post and your video that you did on this topic, and of course your YouTube channel, which you should all subscribe to. It's fantastic content. Anything on the way that we should know about, Kairos, on the channel?
I just recently started grad school, and I'm kind of testing the waters as far as my own time. So not anything super exciting right now. Well, except for
that's not a ringing endorsement to subscribe. I don't know what is. What's on the way? Nothing pretty much. Nothing exciting, at least. I can guarantee that.
That's right. No, I am keeping up the quality tier list videos and some other things, and we'll see.
There's always good stuff for the nothing crazy exciting on Kairos. Kairos is like better than 99% of other content out there. So that is my endorsement for you. Kairos, a pleasure having you on, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
You too, man. So guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kairos. Always love having him on. Make sure you check out my YouTube partner, Bren Chong. His information is in the description below. Guys, thanks so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.